before we really get into this episode, I want to preface this entire show by saying I don't understand anything. I have no idea what's going on, and nobody else does either.
The past 72 hours have been kind of like one of those weird situations where you're like, this could be the Twilight Zone, like we could be in like a sub-layer just existing in dark matter because kind of crazy sporadic things are happening that otherwise wouldn't. We woke up in where we live, like Waterloo, which is about an hour outside of Toronto, to a like devastating ice storm. I looked out my window and my car was caked to an inch of ice. And I work at a university, and they're like, yeah, campus is closed. The university I work at has closed, I think, twice in its entire history, and they're like, oh no, we closed. So like an ice storm. We've heard every version of Ken Holland possible through different media outlets. Toronto fans are mad about a Matthews contract that locks him up through his scoring prime as well as the team's window.
And also mad about a not Mitch Marner contract.
Yeah. It's been a weird time. Oh, Brian Boyle got traded for a second-round pick.
For some reason.
It's a bizarre time.
We live in the upside down.
Yeah, it feels kind of like the upside down.
I forgot to even tell you before the episode, but I was so happy with the ice storm. I finally, for the first time in my life, got to punch through my window.
Oh, lucky! Man, I am so jealous.
So the trick is you let your car warm up for about 10 minutes before, so the part of the ice that is right up against your window melts, but the ice coming down from the roof and attaching to the door is still solid. So when you roll the window down, the ice doesn't move and you can just punch through it.
I'm so jealous.
It felt magical.
I actually didn't drive. Worked from home today. I didn't drive anywhere up until I came to come here. And I misjudged how much time I would need to de-ice my car by about 25 minutes. Also, the little part of your car in the door where the window descends into,
yep.
And all those motors are. I hope that has good drainage because I shoved a lot of ice down there accidentally.
I was gonna say, how did you pull that off?
With the scraper, I was scraping downwards, and instead of scraping off, the ice just slid down into that gap.
Why would you ever scrape down?
My only gap was at the top, and I had to scrape down from the top.
Sideways.
No, but there was no room. Anyways,
I'm confused.
If my doors go, we'll know why. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. I thought this episode would have no content, but like we mentioned,
everything happened.
Everything happened. A lot of Ken Holland talk. Some pretty specific things were said, but the problem was they were said from all angles and all perspectives. So, is anything clarified? No. Do we have lots to talk about? Yes. The Matthews extension got signed. There were a couple of trades.
I think we already went over this.
Kind of unassuming. But they do explain, or they do kind of give some idea of what the rest of the league will look like. Yeah, we got stuff to talk about.
Okay, so
are we starting with the Red Wings?
We're gonna start with Kenny.
All right.
Kenny managed to say everything over the last 3 days without actually saying anything. So we're back to now that we're in the upside down.
Yeah.
Ken Holland said that he's looking towards next year to hopefully contend for a playoff spot.
Yeah.
And that he might have to re-sign certain players to make sure they're competitive next year. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but in the same breath, he said if really good offers for these unrestricted free agents, and for those who are unaware, we're talking about Jimmy Howard, Nick Jensen, Gus Nyquist, Nicholas Kronwall, Thomas Vanek, all the UFAs. He might have to sell them if the price is too good to pass up. So basically, Ken Holland says in the same breath, I'm planning on re-signing some guys, and in the same breath, I'm planning on trading guys. So what we can take from that is nothing. He might trade all of them, he might trade none of them. And he said as much.
As the resident first to criticize Ken Holland, I'm going to do a little bit of optimism here. If you have a general manager who has a lot of assets in a saturated market to sell, this is the best lip service you could be giving. Because it tells competing GMs, or GMs who could possibly bid on these guys that, hey, I can't guarantee that Nick Jensen will be sold no matter what. So there's no way I can just make a lowball offer, assume no one else wants him, and then he'll have to come back to me. Because if he's willing to sign him, then I'm going to have to up my game to make sure I get him. Because I will either lose him to another team or to the Red Wings re-signing him, and then I lost my chance at a cheap Nick Jensen. That very well could be. Ken Holland's not a dumb guy. This isn't his first rodeo. He's a very experienced general manager. He does kind of know the right things to say, depending on how you want to take that statement. But I don't quite lean into that being the full case. I think there is some truth to it. However, I genuinely believe that Ken Holland genuinely believes that trying to compete for next year is the right move. And I wholeheartedly disagree.
I disagree with it, but he has to say it.
He does, and he does, yeah.
For all the people saying, oh, you think you're going to compete? He's got to sell season tickets, guys, and get eyes on the TV. If he says, yeah, we're going to suck next year, it's going to be even worse than this year, nobody's buying season tickets, nobody's going in. And guess what? If we as fans do not spend money on the team, they don't get to spend to the salary cap. So he has to sell hope, and he has to sell it as soon as possible. So the approach that I've gathered Ken Holland is taking is he's going to do whatever gets max value out of these assets. Now, to state that, I know I talked a little bit about this with Gus Nyquist last week, but this kind of applies to all of them. He's going to weigh what's more valuable to the Detroit Red Wings right now. 3 years of Nick Jensen or a third-round pick? Well, we know Nick Jensen's a terrific defender, even if he contributes almost nothing offensively. He's probably going to come in relatively cheap. I would guess I would keep him happily for $3 million or less. And a third-rounder is only about 11% to turn around into an NHL player, forget a player of Jensen's caliber. So, again, it's always not so cut and dry. Even if the Red Wings are a dumpster fire of a team for 2 more seasons, having a cheap Nick Jensen for that 3rd season could be valuable. There could be a lot to gain from that. We don't know. Ken Holland doesn't know. Nobody knows. He's trying to weigh the benefits. But if a team comes along, we will give you a 2nd-round pick and a half-ass prospect for Nick Jensen. Kenny can go, there's good odds that's going to turn into something we could use. That's worth the gamble. Let's ship him off. And it's the same train of thought with Gus Nyquist. Is 3 to 5 more years of Gus Nyquist better than a 2nd-round pick if that's what we're going to get? Statistical odds say yes. That's more likely where the value is going to come from, but then it's you have to do other things to make the team good in that window. Same thing with Jimmy Howard. Now, the only thing that really concerned me is apparently now there is rumors coming from a couple sources that Nick Kronwall might be back next year, which is asinine. Don't get me wrong. When Ken Holland came out and said, no, we are not shopping Nicholas Kronwall this year out of respect for Nicholas Kronwall, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Mm-hmm. This guy is a lifetime Detroit Red Wing. He's earned the trust. His return would not be even worth discussing. Because is Nick Kronwall getting anything more than a 4th-round pick at this point? No. You keep him. You let him mentor the young guys for the rest of the season. I'm absolutely on board with that. But you can't bring him back next year. Here's the concern I run into. More so with the defense than I do with the forwards, because there's going to be, between Vanek not being re-signed, assuming he's not, if Martin Ferk's let go and like one other, like a Jacob Delarose or whoever isn't brought back, there's going to be spots available on forward for Zadina, Svechnikov, maybe Veleno, whoever, right? Although, and we will get into that prospects because Ken Holland got very specific on a bunch of them, which I found very interesting. And I do want to spend some time on that later. I'm concerned on the defense. So if the only 2 pending UFAs on defense for the Detroit Red Wings right now are Nicholas Kronwall and Nick Jensen. If they extend both of them, Detroit's defense next year is looking like Danny DeKeyser, Mike Green, Nick Jensen, Nicholas Kronwall, Trevor Daley, Jonathan Erickson. You'll notice I didn't say Dennis Cholowski or Philip Hronek. That is my big concern out of what I took from everything that's come out over the last few days. Again, if we re-sign Nyquist and Jimmy Howard, to me, are the more cut and dry cases for me. I see value either way. If they stay or if they go, there's going to be good value for the Red Wings. I'm not worried about what happens with those two at all. Ideally, I'd like them both traded for first-round picks, but I'm also aware that's a slim possibility for both of them. But we need, forget Libor Sulak and Joe Hicketts, who are probably, not more so Hicketts than Sulak, but who guys are probably ready, getting close to making the jump to the NHL. We need spots for Hronek and Cholowski. Hicketts and Sulak should be the call-ups. Like, if Cronwall and Jensen should go, if for no other reason, then you need the space. Now, if Ken Holland's master plan is, I'm going to keep Jensen and Cronwall, but I'm going to buy out Eriksson, I'm going to trade Trevor Daley because apparently he's got some interest. Cool, that's fine with me. I am okay with that. But you have assets in the system now that you have to account for. Detroit's already got 10 picks in this draft, 2 seconds, a very high first-round pick, and they had made, what, 30-something picks over the last 3 drafts? In terms of volume of assets, they're fine. They need game breakers more than they need volume of assets right now. But for the love of God, Kenny, utilize the assets you have.
I am going to jump in while you take your first breath in the past 32 hours, Brad. I actually, before we go on, if it seems like Brad is getting a lot of words out, he's actually getting his wisdom teeth removed tomorrow, which is why he's trying to do as much talking as he can right now.
And we almost had to record tomorrow, which would have been
Brad was like, I can try to power through tomorrow, and I remember trying to talk a little bit after my wisdom teeth were removed. I'm like, oh God, no. I appreciate your dedication is admirable, but we won't try to do that.
I was saying I'm getting all 4 out.
Oh, yeah. Fat chance you were going to go tomorrow. Oh, sure, come on.
Come on, everything happened.
And then you get nauseous, and then you throw up blood out of your mouth. I'm going to talk...
Would be entertaining for the YouTube part of the podcast.
Yes, but we'd have to censor it.
No, we wouldn't.
No, we would just have to demonetize it.
Yeah, because there's boobs on YouTube, dude.
Kids, stay off. Parents, put on parental controls. I'm going to go in descending order of players where, if Holland re-signed them, how I feel. From most comfortable to fire Holland.
Okay.
Gustav Nyquist. Genuinely good player. I think how he's playing right now is within his defined skill set and abilities. Do I think he's going to get much better? No, obviously not. This isn't a guy that's he's going to be 30 next year. But 3 to 4 more years of Gustav Nyquist is good hockey, like you said. The guy is, what, on a 70-point pace right now, especially
pretty
lately?
Close to it on an awful team. So if he has a Zadina or a Veleno in a year or two that turn out to be real players, that's only going to help him.
And there's nothing. I know I was coming in a little bit hot before, but I think I've kind of leveled my head on this. Anything less than a first is not enough for Nyquist. A first or equivalent assets.
Or a second-round pick plus a pretty good kicker. And
I'm talking a pretty good defensive prospect or a pretty good scoring forward.
Yeah.
Like we're talking a future top 6 guy, potentially.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to get creative, too, if you're Ken Holland, because there are teams who are looking for more of the now than the future. So Nashville just traded their second-round pick for Brian Boyle, so they couldn't trade a second-round pick. But there are rumors that Eeli Tolvanen is not untouchable. Sure.
Yeah.
By all means, he was a 30th overall pick, like Joe Veleno. And he's been up and down. He's a gamble, but no more of a gamble than an early second-round pick would be. So, yeah, sure, if that's the cost, by all means.
And here's the thing. If Kenny can't, in a year with a decent amount of players with Nyquist caliber, or at least perceived market value available, if he can't get a first, I'd say re-sign him. Try again later years. Don't give him a full NTC. Don't give a full no movement clause. Re-sign him. We've seen Thomas Vanek get traded for a first, or worse players than Nyquist get traded for a first when they absolutely should not have.
Any other year, Gus Nyquist is a first-round pick plus.
Yeah.
No questions asked. In my opinion, he's a superior player to Tatar. Tatar got a first, second, and a third. But again, this is not your usual year. Nyquist would be one of the gems of trade deadline day any other year, but with what's going on in Ottawa and Columbus right now, he goes way down the list because of that.
Nick Jensen, I think, is playing great hockey, some pretty underappreciated hockey. Is still by Red Wings fans. I'm not confident that this is the level he'll play at forever.
He's 28.
I believe this is an overperforming season. if he's re-signed, there is still going to be perceived value in a defenseman that has at least performed one good season. That carries forward, especially with defensemen. Kind of like goalies. You see one solid season, GMs will look at that and say, okay, well, that's there. I don't think Nick Jensen's going to get worse, really. So even if he plays at this level next, like, for sure, re-sign him. If I'm envisioning a future Detroit Red Wings defensive core where Nick Jensen is the number 4 to 7 D-man, that's great. I'd like having Nick Jensen on this team. In my head, I still value him more as a trade asset than a player, but if he stays, it's whatever.
Again, it all depends on cost with these two players, too. Nyquist, again, I cannot remember for the life of me who reported it, but apparently the rumor is for Nyquist's next contract, it would be very, very similar to his current one. So if the option is a second-round pick or resign Nyquist for 4 by 4.5, cool, I'll take the 4 by 4.5. Again, same with Jensen. I'm not coming in over $3 million on him, and I would hesitate to give him more than 3 to 4 years of term as well.
If Vanek is re-signed for another year, I'm probably yelling, fire Ken Holland.
It's needless. He's terrible.
If Nick Cronwall gets... I love Nick. I agree with Brad. And this is me saying draft 50 times in 3 years if you can. I agree with Brad in that not selling Cronwall is the right thing to do organizationally. If Nick Cronwall is re-signed for anything more than a one-day contract to come out and, I don't know, like something ceremonial, I'm like, that's it. It just cannot happen. I'm hoping it's a baseless rumor. It just absolutely cannot happen.
No, it cannot. And like I said, it's important to understand, too, that not everything in the game of hockey is black and white. The easy thing is to sit here and say, oh, we need to trade everything that's not bolted to the floor for assets and picks and yada, 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 because it's value. Stuff like Cronwall going to Ken Holland and say, please don't trade me. I want to finish the season here. And Ken Holland agreeing to that, that's big because other players around the league see that. And that kind of stuff matters to them. So if, not again, to use the extreme example as always, a guy like Erik Karlsson will see that. So he'll know that if he signs a 7-year contract in Detroit and year 7 comes around, well, if I'm with an organization that long, I've built up some respect, I asked them not to trade me, and they won't, that kind of trust goes a long way with the player. So yeah. It's not going to be a definitive factor as to why a player will sign somewhere over another team, but it could be a tiebreaker.
The logjam that would be caused by Cronwall, lesser by Vanek, but by both of them being, so it just makes me nauseous to think about.
Again, if they re-sign both of them, but they move on from 2 other defensemen, I'm fine with that scenario as well.
I'm still not great with it.
I don't see that scenario happening. Because again, when they go on the narrative of veteran presence and they're talking about Advocator and Helm and guys like that, that's garbage. Mm-hmm. These are bottom 6 forwards who have never played at a high level in their lives. Other than working hard, what are they possibly going to teach the younger generation? Philip Zadina already knows more about goal scoring than either of those two. A guy like Nicholas Cronwall, though, who was a top-end performer in the league, he has value in teaching younger players because he's been near the top of the league in his craft. He knows those little nuances of the game that a guy like Justin Advocator wouldn't. I don't mind if you keep him on as a 6th defenseman to teach the younger guys. But here's the catch. If you want him to teach the younger guys have to be on the roster.
Not from the press box. You look down from above.
Yeah, view, so it's concerning. So again, I absolutely, to kind of circle back, I absolutely see what Ken Holland's doing here, and I'm not freaking out. Again, everybody has their knee-jerk reactions on social media when they see stuff like that happen, including us. We always try to throw out an opinion pretty quickly. I have no problems with anything Ken Holland has said over the past couple weeks. It's all going to come down to actions. If nobody gets traded, then I'm concerned. And again, we haven't even mentioned the fact that, okay, the guys you're keeping, if you're going to extend them, you have till the deadline to extend them. You are not going past the deadline on the maybe that these guys will sign. The only truly unacceptable scenario with these players is if they walk for nothing on July 1st. And by these players, I'm talking about guys with value. Nyquist, Howard, Jensen, etc. If a Thomas Vanek leaves for nothing, whatever. I don't think. He's got a no-move clause, and nobody's going to trade for him, so it doesn't matter. But no, like, you either extend Howard, Jensen, or Nyquist, or they are gone. Do not risk it. That's the unacceptable scenario here.
Let's talk a little bit about prospects. Most notably, Ken Holland did mention specifically that Zadina will get a chance in March, which does kind of solidify and validate our theory from before, which is when we found out everything that would come out with the upcoming expansion draft with Seattle. If Zadina doesn't play more than 9 games this year, he's not, like, you wouldn't even have to protect him because he's automatically not eligible to be picked up by another team or by Seattle. And so that is an overwhelmingly favorable incentive for Detroit to not play him more than 9 games. So for Ken Holland to give a specific time frame, like he's going to get a shot in March, where there's only so many games left in the season, it means Zadina's coming up for 9 games.
Which is fantastic. And it probably won't be the last 9 games of the season, as I was mentioning on Twitter to someone today. Grand Rapids looks like they're a pretty good team this year. They might make a run. So you don't want Zadina getting out of sync with that team going into the playoffs. So again, March versus April is the right timeline for him to come up and get his games in. And then you send him back to Grand Rapids for the end of the season so he gets his rhythm with the Griffins again going into the playoffs. I'm super curious to see how Zadina is going to do in Detroit because he strikes me as the type of player who the stronger supporting cast he has, the better he actually will be because of his ability to finish plays. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think this is the right move, and I love that Kenny said that definitively.
Yeah,
I really truly appreciate that rare bit of transparency from him. Now the next part, as we're talking about prospects, which was insane to me, is he basically out and out ranked some of the Red Wings prospects. He said he expects Zadina in Detroit next year. He said plainly Svechnikov will be in Detroit next year because he's no longer waiver exempt. And I think he mentioned Hronek as, I think he used the phrase "a step above," which is him basically implicitly saying these guys are going to be in Detroit next year. Fantastic. I want Zadina, Svechnikov, and Hronek up in Grand Rapids next year, so that leads me to believe he's at least eyeing the roster configuration for next year to create the space for those guys, which gives me a little bit of optimism going into this deadline. And then he started talking about guys like Veleno, Gustav Lindstrom, and Jared McIsaac, who he said they're a step below. Not bad, just probably not next year. Again, a rare bit of transparency that I truly appreciate. I did not think McIsaac or Lindstrom had a snowball's chance in hell at seeing Detroit next year, so that was not surprising to me. Veleno, I figure if there's injuries, we'll get a chance, but again, with the roster logjam that is looming, I don't expect him in Detroit next year. But because of his exceptional status in the queue, he is Grand Rapids eligible, whereas Jared McIsaac is not, despite them being the same age. So that's perfectly fine because Joe Veleno will be in professional hockey next year. It's just Detroit or Grand Rapids, and where Veleno is at in his development, I don't think there's a wrong option there, much like Zadina this year. So,
but if Vanek walks, Nyquist gets traded.
Maybe. So, again, we got Ferk's probably not being re-signed. Holland has already said Svechnikov is in. So, and that doesn't even factor in if they. I do expect Detroit to at least do a little dabbling in free agents this summer. Hopefully, more impact players than depth players, but
both Duchesne and Stone. It's only what a 10-12 hour drive to Detroit from Ottawa.
Yeah. You want to hear my ultimate little bit of useless optimism that I put in my own brain after listening to another podcast this week? I think it was actually, I forget which one it was, but they were talking about how contract talks between Erik Karlsson and San Jose don't seem to be particularly hot right now.
Wait, really? Because he's eligible to.
He's eligible to extend now, and apparently it's like they're talking, but it hasn't.
He's not taking less than Doughty money.
No, and there's been no report of a contract nearing or how the clocks are going, and generally in stuff like that, no news probably isn't in favor of the team. Mm-hmm. And then I remembered that Erik Karlsson really did not want to leave Ottawa. Like his family's there, his roots were there. Like he did not want to leave. It was just the team was so toxic. Toronto doesn't have the cap space. Montreal won't have the cap space. That means the next 2 closest options for him are Buffalo or Detroit.
Oh man, if he goes to Buffalo, oh boy, is that a huge game changer for the Atlantic Division. And I mean, it's another team to compete with Toronto and Tampa.
If he goes to Detroit, that's a game changer for the Atlantic. Detroit's biggest depth is not Detroit's issue. It's lack of impact players. If they get an impact player, the rebuild gets bumped up at least 2 to 3 years.